What's up, you guys? Thank you for clicking on the video today. This video, I kind of just want to talk about 6-speed swaps before I get started on mine. So some of you probably know a little bit about 6-speed swaps when it comes to putting an STI 6-speed into a WRX. And what most people do is they'll just buy a pallet that has the transmission, drive shaft, axles, differentials, everything. And even like sometimes the subframes and the hubs come with that. And since the WRX is the same chassis as the STI, all those parts just bolt on and then it's ready to go. For Legacies and Outbacks, it's a bit different and it's a bit more difficult than that. So there's lots of information out there about how to do a STI 6-speed swap into a WRX, but there's not much information out there on how to swap a STI transmission into a Legacy GT or Outback XT. So that's what I'm going to go over today. Now, just to let you guys know ahead of time, I did not do this the cheapest way I could. This was definitely probably the most expensive way and the most reliable and safest way also. So let me just start showing you what I got and the parts that I need, and then explain a little bit why I chose and to do what I did. So let's start here with the main part of the swap, which would be the STI 6-speed. So this is a 2007 STI 6-speed, and this is brand new, never been used, brand new OEM from Subaru. Here is the trans code for anybody interested. If you look up that trans code, you can find all the gear ratios and stuff, but basically it has the DCCD center diff. It's got a helical front diff and a torsion DCCD center diff that's electronically controlled to vary power output from the front and rear. So there's a few things you need to buy, one being the little piece here that goes to the shift linkage, reverse lockout cable, and bracket. I think that's about it, actually. Most of the stuff comes with the transmission. You get a lot of stuff there for the money, and it's brand new, so you don't have to worry about how the transmission was used before. So as you may have guessed, buying a brand new transmission from Subaru is not cheap. It cost about $7,000 at the time of making this video, and the prices have been going up recently. Now, it would be cheaper to buy a used transmission, and you can buy those pallets, but with the Legacy, most of the stuff that comes on that pallet, you're not going to use and you're going to sell, and it's going to be a pain to sell some of that stuff on its own. But also, a lot of the information you see out there talking about doing STI 6-speed swap, that information is from, you know, mid-2000 when these transmissions were pretty new. A lot of people were swapping in used STI engines into their cars, but they only had, they had low miles because the cars were only a few years old. But 2007 was a long time ago, and those cars are all very old now. So people who are totaling STIs and parting them out now, all those cars have like 150,000 miles on it. And I just can't justify spending $5,000 on a pallet of stuff that I'm only going to use the transmission and the differential, and they have 150,000 miles on it. That's a lot of miles. Another option would be to get a JDM transmission, which is a lot lower miles. They usually have 60,000 miles or less on those transmissions, which is good. That's a reasonable amount of miles. They're about the same price. Only downside of JDM transmissions is the gear ratios are different, and the final 6th gear ratio for a JDM diff is about 0.84, which is terrible. Like highway speeds, you're gonna be screaming in the RPMs. It's not an issue in Japan, but in the United States, like I do like 80 on the freeway. So having that high of a final gear ratio is not gonna work for me. So this transmission has, I believe, a 0.75 final 6 gear ratio. A lot better for cruising on the freeway. So I didn't want to go that route. And you could go that route and then swap the gears out, but that's a lot of extra work too. So long story short, the reason I decided to buy a brand new transmission was because I don't want to have to worry about installing the transmission and something being wrong with it, having to pull it out and then pay to fix it. Because if you have one thing go wrong, you have like a bad synchro or the center diff is broken or worn, which they are wear components, you have this used transmission that needs to be fixed. Usually the cost to fix it is going to be about added on to what you would just pay for a brand new transmission. So I thought with my luck, just to skip the gamble of buying a used transmission and hoping it's fine, and just spend the extra money now and buying a brand new transmission that I know has never been used and never been abused. So I'm starting fresh and I don't have to worry about anything going wrong with it. I am kind of curious. I haven't seen anybody do it, and I would like to try it, but it's kind of an expensive test to do. But I suspect that any STI transmission from 2005 or 2004 up until 2015 would fit in these cars, because they're all for the EJ25. They all use the same rear end. The ratios are pretty similar. So I feel like they would fit, but for some reason nobody does swaps past 2007. Like if you have a 2008 WRX, then you can swap a 2008 STI transmission in it and it's fine. But nobody seems to do any older than 2007 in the Legacies. So I don't know if there's a reason for that or what, but I suspect that you could make a newer STI transmission fit, and you can get one for, you know, a good price that has low miles still, because those cars, you know, a 2015 STI would still have low mile. That might be an option if some of you are trying to experiment with that stuff and want to do this. It might be worth the try. So that's the expensive part, the main part of this. Also, the Legacy GT Spec B comes factory with a 6-speed transmission, but it does not have a center diff. You could buy a Spec B pallet for like $3,000. They're pretty cheap, and then you get a strong 6-speed and all the stuff you need to put it into a Legacy. The drive shafts are correct, the differential, the axles are correct, everything. If you have a Legacy or an Outback and you're trying to do this as cheaply as possible, that's the way to go, is just to buy a Legacy GT Spec B pallet, but you won't have the center diff. I wanted the center diff since I'm going through all this trouble to do this project. I want to have that center diff so I can have all the, you know, rally car fun and stuff like that. All right, so next thing I want to talk about is the rear differential. This is a rear differential. This one's used. It's from a 2015 STI. It has 39,000 miles, so it's pretty low miles. I painted it and cleaned it up so it looks newer and stuff, but it's obviously used. I don't want to go into too much detail on all like the specs and details and stuff like that, but basically I think it's after 2006 or 2007. These have a 1.1 to 1 center diff ratio, so the front differential is a 3.9 final drive. The rear differential has to be a 3.54 final drive. And I think from 2007 and up, all the STIs up until 2015 have the 3.54 rear differential. So this is an R180 rear differential with the 3.54 final drive, and it has a Torsen limited slip differential in it. This is the correct matchup to that transmission right there, even though it's from a 2015. So those are the, you know, big pieces. In order to get this to fit or into a Legacy GT, you need to use a lot of the Spec B parts. Spec B had the 6-speed in it, and a lot of the parts are transferable. The Spec Bs came with a standard R180 diff, like all the other 6-speed cars did. But the one issue with that is that the Spec B, it uses the same hubs that are on the Legacy GTs, which are 5x100. So that makes it difficult, because usually when you do a STI swap into a WRX, you switch the hubs. So you get STI hubs, which have the correct spline for the STI axle. But there's no option to swap hubs on a Legacy GT because the Spec B has the same hub. So what you have to do is you have to buy a hybrid axle that comes factory with the Spec B, but they're very expensive, and Subaru is the only one that makes them. You can get like some built ones from Drive Shaft Shop, but they're more expensive. So I had to buy these from Subaru, OEM. These are OEM Spec B rear axles, and they were like $300 a piece. So they're very pricey, but this has the correct spline to go into the R180 diff right here. So it has an STI spline right here, and then the Legacy GT spline here. So it works with the 5x100 hub, and it works with the R180 diff. So this is technically a hybrid axle. For some reason, the front axles are the same. You don't need to use Spec B front axles. You can just use regular Legacy GT front axles with the 6-speed. So I'm just going to use the ones that are already in the car, and then apparently that works. So I'm going to show you some of the other things I got. A lot of this stuff is not required for a swap, but at the same time that I'm doing this 6-speed swap, I'm also converting to Legacy GT suspension geometry. So I'm removing the body spacers that come factory on the Outbacks to make them like lifted and higher. Because if you look at like my car from the back, you can see the axles are like tilted up because the subframe is lower than a Legacy GT, and obviously I'm lower than a Legacy GT. So if I remove those body spacers, it'll correct the axle angle and make everything work better and handle better and everything. I'm also doing that conversion while I'm in here. And just to briefly surmise what that conversion requires, it requires a different trailing arm bracket to go in the subframe because you're removing the spacer, so you need shorter bolt. New drive shaft that has the carrier bearing that is meant for the Legacy GT because the Outback one is different. Front lower control arm mount. The transmission mount is also different. The transmission sits lower in the Outback, so the shape of the cross member is different, so you need to get a different cross member. So a lot of those parts that I have here are for that as well, so you don't need those if you are not doing a conversion like that. So since this has a DC-CD, we need a DC-CD controller. I'm using an iWire controller here, which is just a computer that it's like basically a standalone computer for the center diff, and it has switches and stuff like that. So that's going to be wired in there too. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you also need a STI or Spec B outrigger mount for the rear differential, because I think you can use the 5-speed, the R160 mount, but there's claimed to be some issues with that. So I just got an aluminum Spec B one. This next part is really cool, I think. So this is a brand new ACT clutch. I got a good deal on this one. This is the part number for this. I didn't think I was gonna go with this clutch, but it was such a good deal that I ended up going with it, and I'm kind of glad I did because this thing is pretty trick. This is their new modular twin disc clutch. It comes with a release bearing. This thing's fully modular, so all the parts on here can be replaced and ordered, so you don't need to buy a brand new clutch every time you wear through one. But this is a twin disc clutch with a lightweight flywheel, and it has the organic material pads. They also offer this clutch with ceramic pads rated for a lot higher horsepower, but for my horsepower ratings I don't need ceramic clutch plates and it'll affect the drivability. So the XT with the street organic pads or clutch plates is rated at 875 foot-pounds of torque, which is way more than I'm gonna need. But if you don't know, a twin disc clutch with organic pad material, which is an OEM clutch material, they're supposed to be able to hold the power because you're doubling the surface area that it has to clamp and hold the power and transfer it to the transmission. But since it's an organic pad material, you can slip it like a stock clutch. So it retains the drivability, and it also drastically increases the amount of power that you can put through it. So I would say once you get over 350 horsepower, this is twin disc is probably the way to go, at least for a four-cylinder car. Because right now I have a spec stage 2 plus clutch, and I like it. It's a little bit aggressive for street driving, but it's not bad at all. Just stop and go traffic is terrible. Other than that, it's great clutch for the street, but at 380 wheel horsepower on a good launch, it starts to slip a little bit. So I'm definitely kind of getting to the top of the usability on the power ranger there. So a clutch upgrade is definitely better. And for the 500 foot-pound of torque range, you're going to be looking at like a stage 5 clutch, which would be very undrivable on the street. So if you're trying to street drive the car and you're trying to make that much power, you kind of have to go twin disc. So that's why I chose the twin disc clutch. But I'm pretty excited about the twin disc clutch. It looks really cool. Too bad you can't see it when it's in the car, but I'm excited to get this installed and see how it drives. All right, so I'm gonna try to breeze through this other stuff. I got this shift knob here. I can't remember what company I got it from. I'll try to add it in later. But it's a nice heavy stainless steel shift knob with a reverse lockout, which matches my handbrake. To go with that, I got a Cobb double adjustable short throw shifter for a spec B. So this is, you can adjust the throw length as well as the shifter length, so you can still have the short throw but have leverage to not miss gears. Shift knob and reverse lockout were from Billet Work. So this is a part of the transmission cross member for a Legacy GT. To convert to Legacy GT geometry, to remove the body spacers, like I said before. You just need a different, this is a Group N Subaru 6-speed mount, but if you just get you need a different mount for transmission mount for the 6. We got a shift stay. This is one of the shift linkages that goes like right here. Can't do it because of the walls in the way. This one is the part that goes up to the shifter and connects like that. This other shift rod is from a spec B, so they're longer than the STI ones because the car is a bit longer, so you need a longer shift linkage. The shift linkage, this one for the spec B is not available at the time I was making this video, so I got one from an STI and I cut it and welded it and added in 0.38 inches of material, and that in theory should make it long enough to have the correct shifter location in the car. And you can do the same thing with the stay bushing. So if you have STI linkages, you can cut this and add in 0.38 inches and it should make it long enough for everything to work well together. And I also ordered polyurethane subframe bushings. Since I have to remove the body spacers, I need to unbolt the subframe. So I figured while I'm in there, I might as well replace the subframe bushings with polyurethane bushings because they're got 180,000 miles on them, so they probably need to be replaced. And once that's done, that's most of the bushings in my car would be polyurethane. So while I'm in there, I'm going to take care of that. That's going to be a pain. That's probably going to be its own video, so stay tuned for that if you want to do that too. So I got a few other bits in the shed, so let's go check that out and I can show you what those ones are all about. And this right here, this is for the 6-speed swap. This is a drive shaft. For the drive shaft, you could buy a spec B drive shaft, and that would be the correct way to do it, also the expensive way. So any Legacy that came with a 4-speed automatic, apparently the drive shaft length is correct to fit with a 6-speed as well. So this drive shaft is out of a 2009 Subaru Legacy that came with a 4-speed automatic. The only thing is it comes with it's supposed to go to a R160, so it has an R160 flange. With the drive shaft, if you get it from just a Legacy, it has a R160 flange. And the differential is an R180, so it has an R180 flange. So I just pulled this flange off of the car that I got the drive shaft from. So it has the bolt pattern to match the R160 drive shaft, versus this one, it has a bigger bolt pattern for a bigger drive shaft. So one more thing I forgot to mention, you also need to get a clutch hose from a Spec B to go to this slave cylinder. I'll also be plumbing my hydraulic handbrake at the time that I'm doing the 6-speed swap, so that's also going to be on the project list. So I got lots on my plate to do with this swap. So it's going to be quite a few videos of working on the swap and different parts of it. So it'll be pretty detailed, so stay tuned for those videos. It should be helpful if you plan on doing this swap in the future. Even if you're doing a swap into an STI, some of this information will be very helpful. So I know that was a lot of information that I just covered, and I probably left out a few things that are important. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. If you're interested in staying up to date on this 6-speed swap into a Outback XT, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon if you want to get notified when I upload a video. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below. Any questions, leave them in the comments down below. If you know someone who might like this video, please share it with them. And if you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.